All right, let's get right into it. If you really want to understand American politics today, you've got to go back to the 1960s and 70s. This was the moment everything changed, an entire era that completely upended decades of liberal consensus and, paved the way for the Reagan Revolution. We're going to break down that perfect storm of forces, the economic chaos, the intense culture wars, and some seriously brilliant political strategy that allowed the conservative movement to rise. At its heart, this whole story boils down to one massive conflict. On one side, you have the Great Society vision, right? The idea of using the federal government as a tool to fix big social problems. But for the new right, this wasn't just a difference of opinion. It was a threat. They didn't just see liberalism as bad policy. They saw it as something morally corrosive, a danger to the family, to faith, and to economic liberty. It was a clash for the very soul of the country. But here's the thing. All those big victories didn't just happen overnight. Not even close. You have to look at the years and years of painstaking work that came before. The new right built this incredible political infrastructure during what were, for them, some pretty lean years. They were playing the long game, building a machine, piece by meticulous piece. And that machine, kind of ironically, really got its start with a massive, spectacular failure. Back in 1964, Barry Goldwater got absolutely crushed in the presidential election. But what's so fascinating is how that crushing defeat actually became a strategic victory in disguise. See, Goldwater fired up a whole new breed of activist, people who were passionately committed to small government and a hard line against communism. But the real secret weapon was tactical. His campaign built the first ever comprehensive direct mail fundraising database. For decades, the conservative movement used this list to go right around the Republican establishment and talk directly to their base. So the key thing to remember is this: the 1964 loss was a database win. So while the grassroots energy was building, you needed an intellectual architect to give it shape. And that was William F. Buckley Jr. A movement needs a brain, right? Through his magazine, National Review, he basically wrangled all these different conservative ideas into a coherent philosophy. And, crucially, he made the movement respectable by pushing out the fringe, radical elements. He essentially made conservatism ready for prime time. Okay, so ideas are great, but how do you turn them into actual laws? Well, that's where this next piece of the puzzle comes in. The Heritage Foundation totally reinvented what a think tank could be. They weren't just about writing papers, they were focused on one thing: immediate, practical action. And their method was pure operational genius. Instead of just publishing academic theories, they created these super detailed, ready-to-implement policy manifestos. They literally called them briefcase policies. Why? Because a new conservative president could walk into the White House on day one, open their briefcase, and have a complete plan of action. It was a way to completely bypass the slow bureaucratic process and just hit the ground running. It was revolutionary. So the machine is built, it's fueled up, it's ready to go, but it needs the right moment, the perfect conditions to launch. And boy, did the 1970s deliver. This whole decade was basically defined by a national crisis of confidence, a complete collapse of public trust in the government's ability to solve, well, pretty much anything. And nothing destroyed that trust more than the economy. People weren't just in a recession, they were living through this nightmare called stagflation. Imagine this. The price of everything is going up, but at the same time, unemployment is high. It's a painful combination that just went on, and it made everybody feel like the country was just stuck in the mud. Now, what's really important here is the ideological damage this did. For decades, the main liberal economic idea, Keynesianism, said that the government could manage the economy. But stagflation made it look like that just wasn't true. The old playbook stopped working. And all of a sudden, government intervention started to look like it wasn't just failing to help, it might actually be making things worse. And the hits just kept on coming. It was like a 1-2-3 punch. First, you get the economic body blow from the oil embargo, then the political gut punch of Watergate and Nixon's resignation, which just shattered people's faith in the presidency. And to top it all off, the Iran hostage crisis, which made America look weak and helpless on the world stage. So what happens when people lose faith in all the big institutions in Washington, when the government can't fix the economy or protect its citizens abroad? Well, people turn their focus inward. The battle shifted from national policy to defending cultural and moral values at home. And that was the gasoline poured on the fire of the grassroots movement. The fight over the Equal Rights Amendment is the perfect example. On paper, it seemed like a slam dunk, right? Simple equality. But it ran into a brick wall of intense, incredibly well organized opposition led by Phyllis Schlafly. She brilliantly tapped into this deep seated anxiety, arguing the ERA was an attack on the traditional family. The fact that it failed to pass was a huge victory for grassroots conservatives, and it proved that cultural anxiety was a seriously powerful political weapon. Affirmative action was another huge flashpoint. Conservatives successfully framed it as reverse discrimination, and that argument really started to stick. The Supreme Court's decision in the Bakke case showed just how much the tide was turning. It didn't totally end affirmative action, but by banning rigid racial quotas, it pushed the conservative narrative right into the heart of judicial policy. Okay, so let's recap. You've got the economic crisis as the backdrop. You've got the social issues as the fuel. But what was the trigger? What was the single spark that ignited all these separate anxieties into one unified, incredibly powerful political movement? The answer came in 1973. It was Roe v. Wade. That Supreme Court decision was the lightning rod. It took the massive but previously fragmented community of Protestant evangelicals and completely galvanized them. For millions of people, politics went from being a civic duty to a moral crusade almost overnight. This one decision fused faith and politics together, creating a massive new voting bloc that moved with incredible motivation straight into the Republican Party. And this wasn't just raw passion. It was organized passion. It was led by figures who were absolute masters of media and strategy. You had Jerry Falwell and the Moral Majority, James Dobson using national radio, Pat Robertson and the 700 Club. They all used the modern media of their day to build a massive following. And behind the scenes, you had brilliant political operators like Paul Weyrich, stitching it all together into a force built to win elections. So let's pull all these threads together. You take that sophisticated political machine, you combine it with a national crisis of confidence, and then you add the raw emotional power of the culture wars. What do you get? You get the perfect storm, a storm that completely reshaped American politics. And this quote just says it all. The movement had been building for years, right? But it was the chaos and instability of the 1970s that brought everything to a boil. The timing was absolutely perfect. It was the moment the new right had been waiting for to take control of the Republican Party. And here's the most important takeaway. This wasn't just a political wave that crested and then crashed. This era built something that lasts. It created a durable political infrastructure, the think tanks, the fundraising networks, the media empires, and it permanently mobilized the religious right as a major force in politics. The framework they built back then is still shaping our world today. Which brings us right to the present day. I mean, think about it. The big debates of the 1970s. What is the proper role of government? How do we balance individual freedom with traditional values? These aren't historical questions. They are the central, burning questions of our political battles right now. So that really leaves us with a final thought to chew on. We're still living inside the political house that was built during that chaotic decade. So the real question for us is, how do those same institutions, those same arguments, forged half a century ago, continue to define the political landscape that you and I have to navigate every single day?